Hello, everyone. Welcome to the press conference being given by the Los Angeles Airport Peace Officers Association. We will begin shortly with a statement from Marshall McClain, President and CEO of the Los Angeles Airport Peace Officers Association, followed by statements being made by 6 attorneys representing Los Angeles Airport police employees that have filed claims and/or lawsuits against the City of Los Angeles and the Los Angeles World Airports. Please hold all your questions until the end. We will have a Q&A session following the attorneys reading their statements. First, we have Marshall McClain, President and CEO of LAAPOA.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Marshall McClain, that's MCCLAIN, and I'm the president of the Los Angeles Airport Peace Officers Association, the primary bargaining unit for police officers at Los Angeles World Airports, as well as Van Nuys Airports. LAAPOA is calling for an independent investigation into LAX tenure of David L. Maggard Jr., law enforcement and Homeland Security Deputy Executive Director of the Los Angeles World Airports. Our LAXPD officers, more specifically our minority police officers, have endured 5 years of discrimination, retaliation, and toxic leadership by Director Maggard. He has been the subject of 9 individual lawsuits, more than any other leader in department history. That's in addition to a multitude of complaints and grievances focusing on race, gender, and ADA offenses. Outstandingly, despite this, he has been promoted not once, twice, from assistant chief to chief of police in 2016, and then the chief to his current position in 2019. The role includes supervisory authority of over 1,100 civilian and sworn personnel, including the airport police. Los Angeles Airport Peace Officers Association, or LAAPOA, we voiced our oppositions when these issues were brought to light. The City of Los Angeles has zero tolerance policies against discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. Mayor Eric Garcetti has repeatedly spoken out against racism and bigotry, yet he seems to remain silent on this issue of Director Maggard. Furthermore, the mayor's appointees to the Board of Airport Commissioners chose to review employment issues related to Director Maggard in a closed session meeting on July 16th. Somehow they reviewed the unprecedented amount of litigation filed against him and decided there is no confirmation of a pattern of practice of racial inequity, discrimination, or any improper management. They also said they were not at liberty to discuss how they reached these conclusions. If 9 lawsuits do not constitute a pattern, what does? It is long past time for someone in power to explain how Director Maggard continues to have the ability to abuse his position and foster a culture of intimidation and contempt. If LAWA, the Board of Airport Commissioners, and the mayor cannot be forthcoming about their reasons for ignoring this clear pattern of discrimination, then we need an independent, transparent investigation. Our officers who work hard every day to keep our airport safe and the surrounding communities deserve nothing less. Being a police officer in this country has never been under such scrutiny as our profession is now. Being a minority police officer has never been so complicated. The majority of our department are officers of color. We reflect and are part of the community we serve. At a time when our society is reckoning with issues of equality and racial justice, it is a shame, or it actually is shameful, that this pattern of discrimination and disrespect is allowed to continue in our airports. Change is long overdue, and we will not be silent until this is achieved. Thank you for my time.
Thank you, Marshall. Next up, we have Matthew from McNicholas and McNicholas.
Well, good afternoon, early afternoon. Thank you, everybody, for being here. When Marshall asked me to speak, I said, of course I would. And while I currently represent an officer at LAXPD, I have been representing police officers for 22 years against departments up and down the state of California, and I currently represent 50 to 60 officers and firefighters. The reason that's significant is what Marshall just identified and what these other lawyers are going to identify is a persisting pattern of what I would say, what are called internal inappropriate employment practices. And the best way to phrase it is the best policy in the world gets eaten for breakfast by culture when you're in a paramilitary organization. And when you have these employment lawsuits, the biggest loser or the biggest losers are not really the employee. It's actually the citizens of whatever community, Los Angeles, people who go to LAX, because these are the best resources. The human beings that put on the uniform and wear the badge with pride, that's the absolute best resource. And this is why I believe that when you start to, or I should say it this way, that this is why the police departments need to be strengthened, not weakened, because when you start to take resources away from police departments, it causes things like Marshall is talking about to persist. For example, there needs to be proper HR departments. I have never encountered a police department in the state of California to this day that has a proper HR department outside of the department itself. These are issues that need to be looked at. This is why you strengthen the police department and you don't take away the resources, because that resource diversion becomes a problem. And as we all know, if we just read the paper around the country, and even last night in Los Angeles, 2 females were shot at close range in Venice Beach. Crime doesn't take a break. So when the lawyers on this call are representing police officers who are just trying to do their job and the power of the badge is turned upon them, we lose valuable resources in our real fight against crime. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up, we have Bradley Gage from Goldberg and Gage.
Good morning. Having represented about 800 police officers over the last 35 years, this case is a striking one because you have 6 different lawyers and 9 different lawsuits going at the same time. One of the plaintiffs is to my right back here. His name is David Rogers. He's a police officer that has helped to protect and serve our communities. One of the things that I find is significant here is that the city has been aware of problems for several years now, as Marshall has explained, yet corrective action has not been taken. Taking corrective action is not just something that's good business, but also it's the law. Police departments are supposed to enforce the laws, not break them. Police departments are supposed to protect and serve everyone, not just a select few. One of the problems for our society is when the police departments allow discrimination to take place against people, regardless of the characteristic, color, gender, religion, whatever, that sends a message, especially when it's coming from the top. The troops, when they go out into the communities, they see what's happening and they start to follow their leaders. Then you have problems with racial profiling and other types of profiling out on the streets. To protect all of us, we want to protect and serve those that are protecting and serving us. And to do that, we have to fight discrimination, harassment, and retaliation. We have 3 different clients. They did not all wake up one day, as none of the other plaintiffs did, deciding to bring a lawsuit. They did it reluctantly. And they only did it because there was no other way of solving problems at the LAX Police Department. Hopefully, with investigations and lawsuits, we can bring a change. Change is needed, but change will be welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And next we have attorney BiBi Fell from the Gomez Group.
Hi, my name is BiBi Fell. It's BiBi, F as in Frank, ELL. And actually my law firm is Fell Law PC. My firm represents 5 police officers who were all injured in the line of duty. And because of their injuries, after going through the workers' compensation process, the city purchased for them a vest that is a light weight load bearing vest. So it allows the officers to take the weight off of their belts and to distribute it among other areas of their body, which alleviates a lot of the pain that they were experiencing in their low backs and in their hips. And again, these officers were going in to work every day and experiencing that pain from the standard issue belt because they were injured in the line of duty. Now, until David Maggard took over as chief of the department, all of these officers had the load-bearing vest purchased for them, and they were allowed to wear them as a reasonable accommodation for their disabilities. Chief Maggard did not like the way that it looked, and he set a blanket rule that nobody could wear the vest any longer. He gave no regard to any of the officers with a medical condition who needed it, no regard to any of the officers who had the vest purchased for them as a reasonable accommodation for their injury, and no regard to the officers who were otherwise in tremendous amounts of pain while they were out there protecting and serving. These 5 officers stood up to try to get that change. These 5 officers are the tip of the iceberg. For the 5 officers that were willing to stand up and complain and try to get that change to happen, there are many other officers who are just enduring pain because they've seen what's happened to my 5 clients. Each of them has been retaliated against. They've been passed over for promotion. They've been denied overtime, denied the opportunity for prestigious collateral duties, losing out both on that prestige as well as the pay. And allowing officers to wear this department-issued load-bearing vest is such an easy fix. It's such an easy accommodation to allow them to focus on the important parts of their job. Instead, the department is forcing them to endure unnecessary pain, further injury, or potentially have to leave their jobs prematurely. These men have suffered protecting the public, and rather than do one simple thing to protect his own officers, Director Maggard retaliated against them. It's petty, it's illegal, and it cannot be tolerated.
Thank you so much. Next speaking is Attorney Jamal Tooson from Lessem, Newstat, and Tooson.
Thank you. My name is Jamal Tooson, and I'm honored to represent Marlo Richardson, along with V. James DeSimone and his great legal team. I briefly would like to thank the Los Angeles Airport Peace Officers Association for organizing this event and standing with us in the fight for equality and the fight for fair treatment of all its officers. This is a call for competent leadership. This is a call for transparency. This is a call for accountability. This is a call for a work environment for all peace officers that's free from discrimination. My client, Marlo Richardson, dedicated her life to the service of others. She rose to the rank of lieutenant and performed her job in a diligent and competent fashion. Although decorated and receiving incredible reviews, she unfortunately, along like all the officers here today, have become a victim to Director Maggard's pattern and practice of discrimination. This is a pattern and practice that treats officers unfairly on the basis of their gender, on the basis of their color. They're scrutinized, they're overlooked, they're passed up for promotions, and even in some instances terminated without cause. Today, on behalf of Marlo Richardson and all other officers who have suffered discrimination at the hands of Director Maggard, we ask for a change. We ask for immediate investigation into his conduct. Given all the challenges the country and law enforcement is facing today, the last thing we need here in the city of Los Angeles is the head of our law enforcement agency discriminating against his officers on the basis of color. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next up, we have Jim DeSimone.
Good afternoon, everybody. You know, it's August of 2020, and the city of Los Angeles and the Los Angeles World Airport Police should be rewarding and retaining good cops. Diversity, especially in the upper ranks, such as lieutenant, captain, chief, it's critical for a good department. And instead, what we've seen here is all the other attorneys have illustrated is that Chief Maggard and the Los Angeles World Airport Police has fired, disciplined, and demoted exemplary employees such as Lieutenant Marlo Richardson, Lieutenant Adonis Kutchlow, and Officer Michael Gentry. I took Chief Maggard's deposition over the course of 3 days. It took 3 days. And the evidence that Lieutenant Marlo Richardson was wrongfully terminated is overwhelming. A neutral arbitrator wrote a scathing opinion pointing out how weak and specious the allegations against Lieutenant Richardson were. Why did Chief Maggard fire a decorated 19-year African-American female lieutenant who rose to the ranks based on her hard work and dedication and commitment to the community? Because she filled out a light duty memo for another employee that she was ordered to complete by Human Resources. That was the firing offense. You are taking a person who dedicated their career and firing them for a completely bogus reason. Now, Chief Maggard knows that Lieutenant Richardson was ordered by Human Resources to fill out that light duty memo for another employee. She used the doctor's note that the employee provided to fill out the form. The officer had legitimate limitations from a shoulder surgery. She couldn't go out into the field. Yet Chief Maggard has accused Lieutenant Richardson of fraud and recommended launching a sham and biased investigation designed to get her fired. The city of Los Angeles paid tens of thousands of dollars. They haven't told us how much yet. We're trying to find out in discovery, but they hired an outside law firm to conduct that investigation. That law firm, Lever, Cassidy, and Whitmore, and the attorney, Scott Tiedemann, is the same law firm that represented Chief Maggard when he was police chief with the city of Irvine. When I took Chief Maggard's deposition, he initially denied that that law firm ever represented him until I confronted him with the evidence. In any event, that investigation was biased and discriminatory, ignoring the obvious evidence that Lieutenant Richardson did nothing to warrant termination. Lieutenant Richardson was on track for promotion. She had recently qualified for command college before she was terminated. This is a very difficult school to be admitted to. And she should be on the way to be a chief of police here in Los Angeles or somewhere else. But her reputation is destroyed. It's damaged by the arbitrary and capricious acts of Los Angeles World Airport Police. Her reputation is damaged by the arbitrary and capricious acts of the Los Angeles World Airport Police. She can't come back for this. Yes, the arbitrator, after hearing all the evidence, awarded her back pay in order to be reinstated, but how could she go back? When I took Chief Maggard's deposition and confronted him with the doctor's notes and the directors from Human Resources that show that Marlo Richardson was doing nothing except doing her job, Chief Maggard doubled down. He refused to apologize to her. She was on the call, just like she's listening to this press conference today. He said he would do the exact same thing again, to fire Lieutenant Richardson after being confronted with the evidence that all she was doing was her job and what she was told by both Human Resources and her supervisors. And Lieutenant Richardson is not alone. I also represent Lieutenant Adonis Kutchlow. He's with the department. He too, African-American male, 19 years there, on his way up until Chief Maggard came in. And since then, the Los Angeles World Airport Police has subjected him to bogus investigation after bogus investigation, not for misconduct, not for excessive force that we bear witness to from the LAPD and other officers, but for things like word choice when discussing an incident, scanning and disseminating an anonymous complaint letter to the union representatives, as he had every right to do, for using an external USB drive to store documents, just as everyone else does. But Lieutenant Kutchlow was the only one to have been investigated for that. And these investigations were conducted in a hostile and manipulative way, 5-hour questioning, sitting him down. and they were done in a hostile way. And this type of harassment, once you've got those investigations, it thwarts any chance he has for promotion. His reputation too is tarnished. In the same vein, now Officer Michael Gentry, he got promoted as sergeant. He made one comment while speaking with a female officer, used maybe the word honey or sweetie in a constructive way. He gets demoted for it. This is nothing compared to the crude sexually harassing comments that are made at times by other officers, including officers that Chief Maggard has promoted, and the evidence will come out in our cases. So just look at the pattern here. You have dedicated, exemplary African-American supervisory peace officers who have been systematically eliminated, harassed, and demoralized. And what happens? Chief Maggard gets a promotion. He's now Deputy Executive Director, where he still wields influence over personnel decisions. You know, this year we saw hundreds of thousands of people in the streets calling for police reform. Part of transforming the police is to ensure that departments reflect the communities who have dedicated their lives to protect and serve these communities, and with dignity and respect. And what we have here now is a police department that discriminates against its Black supervisory officers. Instead of rewarding them for years of service, they're retaliated against, subjected to harassment, and wrongfully terminated. And we call upon the city of Los Angeles, as Marshall McClain said, to investigate. If the city of Los Angeles could spend tens of thousands of dollars to have an outside law firm investigate Marlo Richardson for filling out a light duty form, well, they could spend a similar amount to investigate Chief Maggard for this pattern and practice of discrimination that the people who are in that department experience every day. These are just the lawsuits that have been filed. But I have been contacted by numerous other individuals who are considering taking action, but want to keep their jobs. They don't want a lawsuit, they want a job. They want to be able to succeed. And the city of Los Angeles should be rewarding those officers instead of thwarting their careers. So we ask for that independent investigation to commence promptly, to commence fairly, and to thoroughly investigate these allegations, because what they will find is that these officers, lieutenants, Lieutenant Cutchlow and Lieutenant Richardson, have been treated unfairly, and they deserve justice. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, we have attorney Theida Salazar from Salazar Law Group.
Yes, good afternoon. Salazar Law Group represents Officer Anthony Paul Boiselle in causes of action against the city of Los Angeles, which are staunchly directly related to wrongful discrimination, as well as improper demotion without cause in violation of the city of Los Angeles charter. There's a saying in society, you're only as strong as your weakest link. The Los Angeles World Airport Police Department is one of the largest in the continental United States. And the city of Los Angeles is one of the most progressive cities and municipalities in the free world. So in this instance, we think that it is imperative that the city and that the department leads by example. In this particular instance, our client is a whistleblower. Now, our office has represented officers in the past, everything from violations of the Americans with Disabilities Act to age discrimination to wrongful termination. Officers are different types of clients. These are individuals that are tasked with protecting and serving. These are individuals that usually do their job. They don't expect to thank you. They just do it because they appreciate it, and it's something that's ingrained in their psyche for them to protect and serve. These are individuals that we expect to be at the forefront of protecting our children, protecting our communities, and in this instance, protecting the largest and one of the most busiest airports in the global free world. It's nonsensical that these officers have to go to job on a daily basis and put up with this type of retaliation, put up with this type of discrimination, and just put up with unfair treatment all up and down and across the board. When does it stop? There's also an antidote. Where there's smoke, there's fire. In this instance, this is a 3-alarm blaze, and it has to be extinguished. And the only thing that will extinguish it is justice and shining light on any injustice, which is a threat to justice everywhere. And we have that right now with our officers in this particular instance. Adding insult to injury with Officer Boiselle was that he was denied his civil service hearing in violation of city, state, and federal laws, including but not limited to violations of due process and the equal protection of the Constitution of our great United States. So we gladly stand before Officer Boiselle, and we support all of the other officers going forward with their causes of action. And we're just here to shine a light on impropriety and injustice, and to say that we won't stand for it, and that our officers deserve better, and that it is up to us as citizens and those with jurisprudence to ensure that they have better. Thank you so much for your time, and we thank you, as well as the Los Angeles Airport Peace Officers Association, for diligently advocating for their officers. Every institution should be so fortunate to have a union that has their back as you do. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. We will now take questions for Mr. McClain or any of the attorneys. Please use the raise hand feature. When called upon, please state your full name, what outlet you are with, and who your question is directed to. You can unmute yourself when you are called upon. If you have any difficulty unmuting yourself, please go ahead and you can send us your question via chat and we can read it for you. Okay, we have a question from Eric Hines. I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Okay, there you go. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, great. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much for hosting us today. I had a couple of questions. The first is, and I don't think it was explicitly stated, but who does the LAAPOA want to conduct the independent investigation? And then also I was wondering how, what status or how many of these 9 lawsuits have been either settled or what their status is.
I'll take that first. Thank you. So we had, even prior to these lawsuits being filed, we had asked for some type of inspector general position being developed. We actually fought that, of getting that installed quite some time ago through the legislature. There's actually language requiring it, just like LAPD has an inspector general position that reports independent of the chief of police to the police commission. We wanted something similar established here at the airport. Someone that's going to call balls and strikes, and there's been pushback on it every step of the way, rather than having someone like Director Maggard to get an quote-unquote independent law firm that actually represents LAWA is not really independent. So we're open to a lot of different ideas, but it's rare that you hear about a police union asking for transparency as well as asking for an investigation. So it has to happen. As far as the status of all of the lawsuits, I don't have that in front of me. Maybe some of the other attorneys can tell you where they're at. Jury trial phase or passing this jail or not. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Steve Gregory.
Yes, hi, good morning. Steve Gregory, KFI News. Marshall, this could be to you or to any of the attorneys. I'm curious, when did the first lawsuit get filed? What kind of time frame are we talking here when Maggard got into office or when he was promoted? When did the first lawsuit happen, or when did the first series of issues or complaints start to come in? And what kind of time frame are we looking at here? Secondly, what has been the reaction to LAWA upper management? I know that the commission's gone through some changes. There have been changes in leadership. Have you been able to talk to leadership about this, and have you been in touch with the mayor's office? Thank you.
Okay, I'll answer first, and then I'll kick it over to Matt McNicholas and Bradley Gage. I think are the 2 earliest ones, as well as BiBi fell with a class action work comp case. So yes, I have reached out to the mayor's office. They are aware of this. The mayor tries to have his own departments and department heads handle things on their own, but I have made them aware of it. The interesting part is that the Board of Airport Commissioners was unaware of any of these lawsuits until we shared it with them. The media packet I sent out to you guys has the face pages of all the lawsuits and the dates and the firms. It also has the correspondence between us and the Airport Commission back in July. Their response simply was that they don't believe that these cases have any merit. They're listening to Director Maggard, who wants to paint this as the union pushing back. The union, as far as LAAPOA, our union, has not filed any lawsuits at all. These are all independent individual cases that are not, none of these are union attorneys hired by our union. So that's just him trying to minimize it and marginalize the situation. So I'll kick it over to the three attorneys. Matt, if you want to go first, and then Bradley and then BiBi.
Okay, so we filed on behalf of Harvey Coleman in early 2018 on a variety of theories. And I think part of your question is, what has the response been, or what has the institutional response been? And in this case, against, I refer to it as LAWA, that's an old acronym, LAXPD. I've actually seen something that I haven't seen in any of the other departments that I have represented officers in, and that is the evidence has shown that they have conflated, they've put the administrative process together with the lawsuit process, which is exceptionally troubling. And what I mean by that is, in the lawsuit, the defense hires an expert to minimize the damages of the plaintiff. Well, the employer took the report from the lawsuit and put it in the employee's personnel package, which I've never seen before in 22 years of doing this. And the personnel package is governed by all kinds of privileges and protections in Peace Officer Bill of Rights Act in the state of California. And they are unabashed about doing so. And so you're saying, okay, well, Mr. McNicholas, that's a nifty piece of trivia. Why is that significant? It's significant because it goes to the lengths to which the institution will achieve its goals. And so now you have a piece of paper that is in the administrative file, which by state law, the plaintiff, the employee, had a right to address under the Peace Officer Bill of Rights, POBRA. When negative paper goes in a personnel file of any police officer, they have a right to be notified in writing and to respond, because it is those files upon which their promotions and transfers are based. So in this case, with Mr. Coleman, they simply didn't care. And the only reason we found this out was because documents were produced in production with notes in the margin. So again, stepping back, it is further to what Marshall has described as institutional issues. As an advocate, I would opine that it's an institutional cancer. It is clearly a paramilitary organization, and it is top down. And I think James DeSimone alluded to this, but one of the most critical things in a paramilitary organization is when those with more bars and stars on their shoulders and collars say it's okay, it sets the tone for the entirety of the organization, which is why the Daryl Gates LAPD was different from the Bratton LAPD, which is different from the current LAPD. It's cultural.
Matt, if I could just follow up real quick then, do you think that the issues and the problems systemically here, as you all described, could this easily escalate to a federal issue like civil rights, federal investigation? Could the FBI become involved in this?
Well, I wouldn't want to comment on that, because once you say the FBI, you're talking about domestic law enforcement. If you're talking about pure civil rights,
I'm talking about the civil rights arm of the FBI to come and investigate. Could this escalate to the level of being a federally investigated situation or complaint? It sounds like all of these complaints are very similar, and they all have racism, discrimination, or retaliation, all of which fall under that umbrella.
I would answer that question this way. Having now lived through the Rodney King scenario, the Rampart scenario, the consent decree that came after the Rampart scenario, the consent decree that came back, and I think it was the early 80s, the Vauchon consent decree at the LAPD, which implemented with LAAPOA certain requirements for hiring. The answer is it quite possibly could. And one thing, and some of the other lawyers can comment as well, you know, I talk to between, this is not hyperbolic, 2 and 15 officers a week. Just before this, I was on the phone with a Brea police officer. This afternoon, I'll be on the phone with a Riverside police officer. Why do I tell you that? Because when you get the smaller departments, they tend to have fewer guardrails on them, and more people wear more hats. And so that one person happens to do 10 different tasks. But when you get to someplace like the Los Angeles Police Department, you know, they have 48 people doing one task, you know, because there's 10,000 sworn. But, you know, I wouldn't want to say, be the guy on the record that says, yes, that's going to happen. But I will say this, the laws in the state of California are designed, the employment laws with which all of these fine lawyers are defending and implementing, are essentially civil rights laws because of the protections based on race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, perceived sexual orientation, whistleblower acts under 1102.5. You know, the legislature and the people of the state of California have empowered employees and lawyers, the lawyers that are on this call, James and Brad, and these other fine lawyers who I'm just meeting for the first time, to pick up the mantle, as it were, to try and obviate the need for federal involvement.
Thank you.
All right. So a couple of things. Our lawsuit was filed April of 2018. We have conducted discovery. We've taken several depositions. We've had a number of trial dates. Those have been continued because of COVID. Our particular lawsuit starts off with allegations that 2 of my clients were accused of being gang members simply because they're African American and they ride motorcycles. One of my clients was called racial slurs, and although that was reported, LAXPD did not want to investigate it. And when LAPD tried to investigate it, it appears that the subpoena for my client was not given to him, and there was an attempt to hide that. So there have been attempts to try and resolve these problems by following processes, including with boards of rights, that the LAXPD has tried to stymie. As far as bringing in the FBI, I have actually had the pleasure of working with the U.S. Department of Justice and the FBI previously in connection with the cities of Lancaster and Palmdale, following a case of civil rights violations to a citizen there. And that led to a lawsuit brought by the United States against the LA Sheriff's Department, and also to a consent decree that hopefully has helped to avoid further acts of racial profiling out there. With respect to the investigation of the top brass at LAXPD, former Chief Maggard, now Director Maggard, obviously that has not happened, and rather than taking proper corrective action, he has been promoted twice. The new chief of police there is actually a wonderful person by the name of Cecil Rambo, but it appears that he does not have the ability to do his job because he still reports to the director. Hopefully, with this press conference and public awareness of what's happening now in the departments, the city of Los Angeles will recognize the need to investigate this further. And the US Department of Justice could very well decide this is the type of a case that the Civil Rights Division should also be investigating. And the reason for that is you have a number of officers being represented by a number of fine lawyers who all allege pretty much the same thing. I am being treated differently because of the color of my skin. I'm being treated differently because of my gender, or I'm being treated differently because of a perceived disability. All of that is illegal, and all of that is something that the Department of Justice can investigate, should investigate, and has investigated previously. Hopefully that answers your questions.
Thank you.
Hi, our lawsuit was filed in June of 2018. And before the lawsuit was even filed, we made an attempt to resolve it informally. My clients really just wanted to be able to wear a piece of gear that would allow them to continue to protect and serve as they have dedicated their careers to do. I was shocked that there was no interest in even discussing a resolution. There was no interest in working with us. There was no interest in trying to come up with any middle ground to avoid a lawsuit altogether. This lawsuit has now been pending for over 2 years, and it has been very litigation heavy in that the lawyers have been putting a lot of time into trying to ascertain the facts and gather the evidence to bring to trial. The Los Angeles Airport Police Department has gotten in the way of legitimate discovery. In our case, they were sanctioned thousands of dollars by a judge for failing to produce relevant documents, for failing to produce now Director Maggard for his deposition. I've done a number of these cases, and in this one, I just can't help but scratch my head as to why we are where we are and what the possible defense could be.
Thank you.
Okay, next, I believe Jim DeSimone wanted to make another statement.
Just to answer a couple of the questions that were asked, our first case was that I filed along with Jamal Tooson, and we've been working hard on it. It was filed back August 15th, 2018. Lieutenant Cutchlow's case came out in 2019, and Officer Gentry's was this year. All the cases are pending. There's been no cases that have been resolved. And I think what the department really fails to appreciate is the damage to the reputation of these officers once they're involved in this type of disciplinary proceeding, in Lieutenant Richardson's case, an actual termination. And I would say there's been a little bit of arrogance in terms of the thought that these cases are somehow that they haven't been harmed that badly because Lieutenant Richardson was offered to be reinstated. And that is just a complete misunderstanding of the way in which insidious racism impacts an individual day to day when they're working for a police department. And when you know that you're not being judged by the content of your character or your good work, but you are being negatively evaluated because of the color of your skin, you see it not only happening to yourself, but other officers. This is a pervasive problem that exists throughout this department. And we would welcome federal oversight investigation. I think it has gotten that bad. Let's be realistic, that might not happen. So the city of Los Angeles really needs to look within. I mean, do they really want to have a situation where you've got 6 lawyers who are going to do their best to get their clients compensated in this case, where it could cost the city and taxpayers millions of dollars? Well, you have a chance right now to nip it in the bud. Do you really want it to continue on? So the next press conference, there's 12 lawyers, there's 15 clients. Time is now to take stock of what's going on and to use this sea change of public attitude towards the police as a way to get in there and do right by the police officers. And everybody I represent are just fine people who want nothing more to do their job and be appreciated for it.
Great, thank you. One more comment from Jamal. Just one moment, please.
Thank you, and I'll be brief. Just following up on Jim, it's just absurd to me, the tactics that's been used not only against us in defending Maggard and his actions, but it seems as though in listening to the other attorneys, this is a common thread, to dump, hundreds of thousands of dollars into defending cases which clearly have no defense. And, if anything positive comes out of all of us taking our time out today during COVID and really trying to advocate for our clients, maybe the city of Los Angeles will take a different approach from here moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. If there are no further questions, I am going to bring Marshall back online right now.
Well, I want to thank everybody for joining us today, both the attorneys and this electronic gallery, as well as all the attorneys here. Just one last thing. In BiBi's case, the outer vest carriers that she's referring to is actually in policy. So you had a new chief of police come in, didn't change the policy. He just said he didn't like the look of it. Started down this path. I want to also mention that these are not all of the attorneys. There's a couple other cases that are out there as well that were recently filed. I just unfortunately wasn't able to get a hold of those attorneys in other cases. So what I have is based off of what we were able to get by records request. And that's how we found out the extent of all of these lawsuits. And again, those are media kits. If you didn't get one, just reach out to info at LAAPOA, LAAPOA.com, and I'll make sure you get that. Also follow us on the different social media streams, and we're pushing out videos as well regarding the things that are going on. So hope you all have a great, safe, and blessed day, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having us. This is an important thing that we want to bring public awareness to and eliminate in the future.
I have one last comment from our media in attendance, and it's something that BiBi pointed to, and Jim, who of course, I know Jim DeSimone, is what I'm referring to him as Jim. And that is, these police departments are not private companies. They are public entities, and the money that they are spending right now is yours and mine, and they are tax dollars. And I have been banging my head against this wall for 22 years because they defend these cases like they're Disneyland or they're Mattel or their shareholders want, so be it. But this is public money. And it actually could be a whole series of articles for the press and the media on this, that why is it that the city attorney, Mike Fear, who ultimately runs this, and the mayor, why do they empower those below them to run their departments like this? At the same time, we are cutting services back. At the same time, Mayor Garcetti wants $100 million from the LAPD. And why are they empowering their outside and inside counsel to fight these lawsuits like they're Walmart? It is really, really its own tragedy. And it actually, in the private sector, would be considered a breach of fiduciary duty. And when BiBi mentioned it, and Brad and Jim, I'm pointing on the screen like you can see me pointing them, on the, when they mentioned it, you know, it just struck a chord that is something. There's no accountability. You know, what accountability is there when, you know, City Hall and they vote for it and they don't? It's mind numbing, and this is not new. This has been going on for decades. Anyway, that was my parting thought. I apologize.
Thank you. Everybody have a great day.